What is up, everybody? It's your boy Ed Savage here. So I'm doing another live stream on the scary stories, but the thing is, look at the time. It's 3 a.m. Well, 3:04. Whatever. It's still 3 a.m. basically. So let's get this started, shall we? Oh, I feel the excitement. I'm so creeped out right now, man.
Number 1. It's been long enough that I think I'm ready to tell this story. Last year, I was dog sitting for my aunt. The dog is small, sweet, and a little skittish. I had worked most of the week, so I was just in the house for the time being. It's actually a nice house. Not big enough to feel empty if you're alone, but not small enough to feel cramped. The only rooms I used were the kitchen, the bathroom, the living room, and the guest bedroom. My last day of work this particular week was a double shift. I was excited because after this I had 2 days off. I planned on using them to introduce the dog to RuPaul's Drag Race. I usually try to keep good spirits for a double shift because, regardless of the time and annoying customers, extra money is always needed. My old job was a barista and a cashier. Now, mornings are always busy and nights are slow. On weekends, people are more concerned with coffee and breakfast than anything else we may offer. I was having a nice time, actually, because this day was turning out to be not as hectic as the previous ones that week. As the morning rush line was dwindling, the limited tables in the restaurant came into view, and I started people watching. As I slowly scanned the customers eating bagels and reading the paper, my eyes met a man at a laptop. He had long, dirty hair and a bit of stubble. I'll be honest, he stared at me with a little too much intensity. I wondered if he found people watching rude, so I decided to clean and restock instead. Now, it didn't take long for a line to reform, so I returned to the register. Once again, after the line died down, I could see the few tables in the front. The man was still there and he was still staring at me. Now, every now and then, he would look at his computer and
Ooh,
then turn
I
back
think
to
I
me.
feel something,
It
man.
actually almost felt like he was looking right through me, or like
I
he
feel
could
like
see every
somebody's
part of
watching
me.
me through my window right
It
now.
felt so uncomfortable that I went and cleaned in the back of the restaurant, out of his sight. After the next rush, I took my break and sat far away from that man.
Dude, I'm
He was out
having
of my
the
sight, and
creeps
I was
right
out of
now.
his. When I came back from my break, the man was gone. My manager
Guys,
asked if
do
I had
not watch
interacted
this
with him
at
again.
3 a.m.
I told her about him making eye contact with me, but nothing else really happened. She told me that man had been watching porn on his laptop, and she asked him to leave. So that was
Wait, he
good
was
enough.
watching porn on his
This man had
laptop?
been watching porn,
What is
and while
wrong
he
with
was
him?
doing so, he was staring right at me. I just really wish that was where this story stopped. Hours passed, and the rest of the day was entirely normal, despite me and a few female coworkers feeling a slight edge. We were in the process of closing, which is actually a process I really enjoy. I'm one of those weirdos that likes to clean. We're well into cleaning, and I'm almost done with my assigned jobs, when my manager comes up to me again. She informs me that the
Dude,
man had found his way
honestly, I
back to the
think
restaurant
somebody
at some
is
point,
staring at
and she
me.
found him hiding in a back corner. She chased him out by threatening to call the cops,
Uh,
and that was that. She knew that earlier in the day, he seemed to be paying attention to me. She said I could finish up whatever I wanted or needed to do, but afterwards, she strongly advised me to get home
it's
as
like a
soon as
black
possible.
shadow that
She also offered to
looks
walk
like
me
he's
to my car.
waving to me.
So I took both offers and quickly got my things together and clocked out. Now, my aunt's house was not far from work. It was a 5-minute drive at most, which of course was helpful because then I didn't feel crippling anxiety for much longer. I got in the house and after triple checking that I had locked every door, got into my pajamas. But unsurprisingly, I wasn't ready to sleep yet. Now is the time to introduce the dog to RuPaul's Drag Race. I proceeded to go into the living room. The living room consists of a couch, 2 chairs, a TV, a window, and the front door. Unfortunately, though, the porch light was broken and the window had no curtains. That, of course, as you might imagine, had me a little bit stressed. But I was willing to take that over the only other TV in the house, which was the one that exists in the scary basement. Facing the basement TV included having my back to a sliding glass door facing the very dark woods. So, no thanks. So, as I was setting up the TV, the dog started to growl. I really didn't think much of it. As I said, maybe the dog is skittish, so he growls and barks all the time. I actually wasn't looking right at him.
I'm
In
gonna put
fact,
the
I
volume
was
up
muttering.
and pause it. Alright, now we can start again.
For him to shut up and figuring out how to work the TV. Now the thing is, the dog didn't stop and started to get louder, so I finally put down the remote and turned to face the dog. That's when I froze. The dog was barking at the window, and there was an outline of a man at the window, the exact same build as the one at the restaurant. I screamed, and luckily that was enough for the man to turn and run away from the window. I stood there frozen for a while, and the dog had calmed down, but I hardly felt safe. So I went into the kitchen, grabbed a big knife, and did what any responsible adult would do. Called my mommy. She didn't advise calling the police. My mom never does. Instead came and spent the night with me. I told my aunt, and I spent the rest of my time dog-sitting clutching the knife anytime I slept or took a shower. My aunt also gave me permission to have one friend stay with me every night. Now, nothing else ever actually happened. A part of me wishes I knew who he was or where he went, or what he even wanted with me. I'm just glad he was a coward, and that all it took to scare him off was my scream and an extra small dog. So, stalker porn guy, let's not meet. Also, who in the right mind watches porn in a sandwich shop? Ugh, whatever.
That's weird. In a sandwich shop?
Number 2. When I was about 10 years old, one late night my friend's parents took us out for ice cream. It was probably around 9:30 p.m. The small town we were in settled down for the night, most businesses having already closed up for shop that night. At the time, our town had less than 9,000 people living in it. My friend's parents were both insanely busy and successful people. They owned many houses and rented them out. His dad actually owned his own business with at least 200 employees. His mother was a college professor who worked in a hospital and did something else online. I actually forgot what it was. Now, as you might imagine, they were pretty inattentive parents. My friend and his brother on multiple occasions broke furniture and other things while fighting, and they wouldn't even notice it for days. And of course, they never made a big deal about anything. I mentioned these details as a little bit of background. So, back to where we were. After pulling up away from the store, just enough that you couldn't see the car from inside, my friend's parents got out of the car and went ahead of us into the ice cream shop. And of course, they weren't realizing we were still in the car.
Hey,
Their
what's
car
up,
had
team?
this weird
Going on?
automatic seatbelt system, and when I opened my door, the
Oh
belt
man,
wasn't
I'm just so
disengaging like it
creeped
was
out right
supposed
now.
to. They had trouble getting it off of me.
Hey,
So
Dokkan
my
mode.
friend helped me out.
So basically, 3 a.m. So a lot of weird shit is gonna start happening. All right. All right. Let's
Eventually,
continue with
we
the
figured
video.
it out and we got out of the car. As we stepped onto the sidewalk, an old man, probably late 50s, early 60s,
Dude, and I feel like somebody's staring at me out the window or something. Like I'm super creeped out right now. Looks like a hand waving at me and everything, man. Alright, let's go back to
ends
the
up
video.
intercepting us. He had these really beady-looking eyes. Thinking back, I wonder if he was high or something, but at the time, he just seemed off.
You kids want to buy a mountain bike?
He asked, half-crooked smile and lazy eye, giving him this incredibly off-putting appearance, especially after we heard his voice. He sounded like a smoker. His teeth were yellow, and we could smell his awful breath from where we were standing. Now, to give you an idea as to what I was like at that age, I was incredibly, well, naive. You could run just about anything by me, and with little effort, I would end up believing it. I was so naive that I took...
Dude, I think I see a face with black eyes. Oh my god. Dude, it's terrifying, man. Out my window. I'm serious, man. It's scary as hell.
the fun out of it.
Don't watch scary. Hey, Black Swordsman. Dude, I'm serious. There's like a guy is standing right in dude, that's scary as hell,
For
bro.
many people would try to trick me, because even after explaining they lied to me, I would shrug it off and act like it didn't matter either way. And of course, taking a while to understand it regardless. Despite this, even I knew something was off about this guy. Why would we want a mountain bike? My friend asked, before I got the chance to ask anything myself.
Well, 'cause you kids like to go hiking. Mountain bikes make it way easier, you know.
But there's 2 of us, I responded. What if we both want a mountain bike? Who gets to have it? Now, this is where he made his first attempt to get us away from where we were.
Well, I have another one at my house, if you want it.
But we don't have any money. And we're just kids. So how do you expect us to pay for them? My friend asked. The man went silent for a minute and then just stared at it.
I'm
Well, you know
having
what? You
I'm
can
having chills on my spine right now, guys.
just pay me back later, friend. It's right over there in my van. Come on.
He pointed across the parking lot, but of course, we didn't see any van.
Come on. It's just behind that building right there. Now, I don't normally do this, but you seem like
So you guys missed the first story. So it was basically a guy watching porn in a sandwich shop, looking at a little kid. That's basically it. This is the second story, actually. Just wanted you to know that.
trustworthy kids to me.
That's when my friend and I looked at each other and decided it was time to go ahead and get to his parents. We had heard enough from this guy and we were seriously creeped out. As we started to walk past him, he backed up and got in our way again. At this point, I was wondering why my friend's parents hadn't come out of Baskin Robbins yet. Surely they realized we weren't there yet, right?
Looks like Slenderman's on my window, man.
Maybe they saw me struggling with my seatbelt and just assumed it was taking us a while to get it figured out. Either way, I didn't see them yet.
Come on. You kids can't walk away from this now. Honestly, this is the best deal you're ever gonna get on mountain bikes. Now just imagine how stupid you would feel knowing you could have had a bike for free.
Well, we already have bikes, my friend muttered.
But I bet they are mountain bikes.
The man growled. He seemed angry at this point. His friendly demeanor turned into frustration. He started to walk towards us, and that's when my friend's dad walked out of Baskin Robbins and asked us what was taking so long. Now, at this point, as you can imagine, the old man reeled and pushed his way past us, walking briskly until he full-on sprinted behind a building.
Dude,
Neither
I
of
don't
us
think
said
that's supposed to
anything.
be there.
They were just too shaken to say anything. So, something else I should mention about my friend's parents. Now, while I mentioned earlier that they were a little bit inattentive, they were two of the most sincere and genuine human beings I've ever met. Always seeing the good in people and denying any bad even existed.
Oh, fuck.
I really
Jesus
don't
Christ.
think his dad pieced together what he saw, and without us giving any indication of something wrong, he likely had no idea. It was days before we even talked to each other about it, and months before we brought it up to anybody else. I shudder to think what else could have happened to us had my friend's dad not left the Baskin Robbins when he did. It's something I push to the back of my head often, but crops up every now and then. Number 3. A little bit of background story. I was 16 when this happened, and I was in excellent physical shape. I'm now 17, and the diner I worked at was on the side of a road, next to a gas
Hey,
station
what's
that we
up,
shared car parks
SSJ
with.
Force?
Now,
So basically, I'm just watching a scary story here. You know, I'm reacting to it. But there's something staring at me at my window. I mean, it's kind of creeping me out. You know, I'm not gonna lie. Alright, back to the video.
the diner had an odd setup. To get to the back bins and the storeroom, you had to go through a big metal door that was at the back of the kitchen. The diner I worked at also had a fresh produce supplier that delivered most days early in the morning, and they had a new delivery boy. I'll call him Billy. Now, Billy had been with them around for 2 months. He was a hot topic between the female employees, as he was extremely good looking, but seemed to be a loner, and I didn't know for sure, but I think he was around 18 or 19 years old. I'd spoken to him before, and he asked me for my number once, but I politely said I don't give it out. I was 3 months into my first paying job at a local diner, working as a waitress, when all of a sudden this happened on a particular day. I was asked to stay on and work the night shift with a female colleague that I was familiar with. I didn't mind, as I saw it as an opportunity for extra cash. Now, it was around 12:30 in the morning when the last family eating left the diner, so it was up to me and the other female waitress aged 18 and the male chef, who I believe was around age 24, to clean and lock the place up, as the owners were on vacation. I decided to take the trash out to the bins in the back, as I was too tired to do anything else like sweep up or clean the tables.
Yes.
To get to the back bins, you have to go through the kitchen and then through a heavy big metal door, which
I'm
I
gonna
was
go,
okay with doing,
you know,
as
find
I've
a
done it many times before.
scarier story.
Now, the
But
only
this
thing
story
is,
is not that scary. Yeah, I know. I'm trying to look for like a super scary one. Let's see here. There's shit here, man. Alright, so how many of you guys are scared of dolls? I'll put dolls. Nope. Alright, now I'm gonna go with this one.
Hey, Night Watchers. Don't forget to check out darknessprevails.org for hundreds of scary stories, our podcast, and to submit your own experience. You don't want to hold these too close to you at night. This world is a strange one. There are a number of cases of real haunted dolls in the world. There's Robert the Doll, who haunts passerbys at his museum to this day. There's Annabelle, who has terrorized families for decades. And now, I have for you today 3 terrifying, allegedly true stories that will make you reconsider your
Hey, you know, I actually have a haunted toy downstairs in the basement. I'm serious. Like, it's haunted.
decorative choices. Yes, it's just 3 stories this time. If your story doesn't appear here, I will certainly be doing another Haunted Dolls video, but I just had to give more of a spotlight to the 3rd story. One of the absolute best and scariest stories I've had the pleasure of reading on this channel. It's about a doll named Wendy. Are you ready for 3 new nightmares?
Oh, that doll just
Number
looked
1.
creepy.
Creepy Baby Laughter. Submitted by Leatherneck Aviation. Hello, my name is Julius, and I'm 14 years old. I'm freaking out since this just happened, and I'm alone in my house right now, and I've never really felt right in this house. I mean, there are 2 dogs, but I still just don't feel safe.
Hey,
It was around 11:15
if you want to see the creepy doll, just tell me, alright? I mean, the haunted toy that I have downstairs. Just tell me, alright?
at night,
It's nothing weird, trust me. It's a real thing. It's really haunted.
and my dad and I had just gotten back from watching that new movie Sully. We live in a fairly large house, 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. This will be important later in the story. Anyway, I'm sitting in a chair in the dining room next to the kitchen. My dad gives a yell to me to brush my teeth. I had headphones on, so it took me a few times to understand what he was saying. I started walking toward the bathroom. I still had my headphones in, but I heard a sound that was outside of my headphones. It was coming from my little brother's room. He's only 2 years old, and I also
alright.
have a 4-year-old sister.
Dude, I'm
I
telling
thought
you.
he was still
Once
awake,
you see-
since there was giggling coming
Once you see this doll downstairs, you're gonna have to bleach your eyeballs, because I'm telling you, this thing is haunted.
from his room. I was told to put him to bed, so I went in. He was asleep, sound asleep. I couldn't explain what was happening, so I just closed the door. I went to the bathroom when it started again. I knew something was wrong, so I opened the door. This time, his cross on his dresser was bent. It had never been like that before, and I don't know how it got that way. I choked down a gasp, and it was just silent. I heard the giggling coming from my little sister's room, and I could feel goosebumps form on my skin. I slowly turned around and closed my little brother's door. Meanwhile, my dad was watching TV. I slowly opened my little sister's bedroom door, and what I saw will haunt me forever, or at the very least, give me nightmares for years. I honestly don't know how I slept last night. She has a lot of dolls. They are usually on her bed sleeping with her. Like my little brother, she was out like a log, but all of her freaking dolls were scattered across the floor, all looking up at me. Then, when I think things couldn't get any worse, one of the dolls that was from my stepmom's mom was on her dresser, and it just fell off and hit my foot. It rolled off of me, and ended up in a weird position where it was facing up and facing towards me with its head. At this point I had enough and was scared beyond belief.
Dude,
I
I'm
calmly
pretty
walked
creeped
out
out
into
right
the living
now.
room and back to my computer at the kitchen table. We went to bed and nothing else happened that night, but when my dad woke up he asked me, "Did you hear the kids laughing last night?" Number 2. Poltergeist or Haunted House. Submitted by Maddie.bk. I live in a small house with my dad. For my birthday, we went shopping at the local mall. I'm 13, but I'm really tall for my age, and I'm also very skinny, which makes it a little hard to find clothing that fits me. So instead, I decided to get some accessories. When we got home, we noticed a small box on the doorstep. It had my name on it, so I assumed it was a relative who sent me a present. I take it inside and we eat. Afterwards, I decide to open the box and check out what's inside. As I open the box, the most horrible smell comes out. I soon get over the smell and continue opening it to see a small china doll. As soon as I looked in at the eyes, my stomach dropped. It was like they were staring right through me, right into my soul. I put it on the shelf in my room and got downstairs to watch a movie with my dad. During the movie, we suddenly heard a creak coming from my room above us. We headed upstairs to find all my books on my shelf were stacked on my desk. I have no idea how they got like that, and I swear to you I didn't stack them there myself. Later that night, we all went to bed. As I'm about to fall asleep, a book falls from my shelf. I looked over and just decided to leave it alone and fell back to sleep.
Dude, legit,
I wake
like
up
I'm
to the
super
loudest
creeped
bang
out
I'd
right
ever
now.
heard in my life. I instantly jump up and scan my room, noticing that my wardrobe doors are open. I watch as my lights turn on. I expected to see my dad at the doorway, but what I saw was a tall, dark figure. In the moment I blinked, it was gone. The lights go out. I scream for my dad, and then the china doll flies from across the room, smashing into the wall, shattering it all over. For the past 3 days, I have been sleeping on the couch. The first night back was quiet, I think too quiet. My cat, who was sleeping with me at the end of the bed, was staring to where the doll was on the bookshelf before. It started to growl like there was a person there. There were far too many happenings going on after that, and we called our local priest and he blessed the house. And thankfully, after that, we never heard the occasional tap or creak or anything like it. The house was back to being dead silent after the blessing. Well, so far. Number 3. A doll called Wendy. Submitted by Connor B. Scared.
I mean, it's half
My
decent,
experience
alright?
all
It's giving me
began
the
before
creeps.
I was born. And no, this isn't a
And I don't really like dolls, alright? Just to tell you that. I used to be definitely afraid, uh, with dolls when I was little. My mom, she had this, doll that she put some voodoo spell on. Because, she's a voodoo, something like that. I don't know what it's called. So she brought it to our house on Christmas. And so it was supposed to give us good luck. And so at the time, my old house had bed bugs, and so I had to sleep on the couch. And so my mom put the doll right near the door, right near that couch. And so one night I woke up, that thing was staring right at me. Dude, I creeped the hell out. Dude, I ran so fast upstairs. I literally didn't care if there was like any bed bugs upstairs. I didn't care about that. I just straight ran upstairs. Dude, I was scared for my life. Alright, well, back to the video.
past lives. I wish it was something as reassuring or positive like that. My tale comes in 2 parts. The first is a story my aunt had told me, an experience I always teased her about and laughed off as nothing more than a fable. I come from the north of England, and we northerners aren't really known for being gullible or superstitious, nor is there much religion from where I'm from. I'm telling you this so you understand that I was raised as an atheist and was very skeptical, even as a child. Unfortunately for me, events would take place that would leave me questioning my own beliefs and wondering if her stories were all real. It all started when my aunt was around 8 or 9. It was Christmas Day in the early 70s, and she was ripping open her last remaining present. To her surprise and delight, it was a doll, but not just any doll. It was the doll she had seen in town months ago and had begged her grandmother to buy. She had been devastated when my grandmother refused, not realizing my grandmother had actually already purchased one of the dolls, and it was secretly stashed away in the loft, ready for Christmas. Now she was staring down into its plastic eyes and blonde hair, the beautiful doll. It was the one thing she had wanted above all else, and as she pulled the doll from its package, in the blink of an eye, she hugged it, and exclaimed that it was the greatest present she had ever wanted, and that they would be best friends forever. She named it Wendy. Being similar in size to my aunt, the doll was the perfect best friend. My aunt would spend hours talking to it, dressing Wendy in clothes my aunt had just grown out of, and scribbling on the doll's face with crayon to imitate makeup. She would host tea parties, and Wendy would be the star attraction. Lynn would spend hours having one-sided conversations with her, as most little girls do with their dolls. Everything seemed completely normal. My grandparents and my dad never once suspected my aunt was in any danger whenever she was in a room alone with Wendy the doll. But they were wrong. One night, my aunt found herself awake when everyone else in the house was asleep. There was nothing special about the night. Nothing in particular had woke her up. She was just simply awake. Climbing from her bed, my aunt, still partially asleep, staggered out of her room and began walking downstairs for a glass of water. She was halfway down the stairs when she heard movement above. Looking up, she saw glances of movement scurrying by the stairs banister. Following the movement with her eyes, her heart almost stopped when she traced the motion to the top of the stairs. Her blood ran cold and she couldn't speak. The sight before her was so confusing and terrifying that it had stolen her ability to form words. Standing there at the top of the stairs was her doll, Wendy. But that couldn't be right. She had left the doll at the bottom of her bed. How could she possibly be standing there at the top of the stairs? Still, it was Wendy. Her Wendy. She wouldn't hurt her, and this was surely every little girl's dream for her doll to come to life. Sadly, that momentary naivete and childlike whimsy disappeared as she stared longer at the doll. Darkness folded around the doll's features, and the top of the stairs grew darker and darker, as if a cloud hung over it. Wendy's crayon-stained face was different. In the shadows, there was a new sinister intent behind Wendy's lifeless plastic eyes, and an insidious look upon her face that filled my aunt with dread. Even as a child, she had enough instinct to back away a bit. She prayed that this was just some awful dream, some awful nightmare, but before she could even attempt to wake herself up, the unthinkable happened. A voice called out from the top of the stairs, the voice of a small girl, or something attempting to mimic a little girl. It was coming from her doll, a doll that had no ability to talk at all. "Come and play, Lynn," the voice called out. My aunt said her whole body began to shake, and she could literally feel herself turning white. She said that she had never felt such a feeling before or since that could compare to that reality-shattering dread. She said it was probably the same kind of feeling a swimmer or surfer has when they are pulled down by a shark. That reminder that this world is not safe or fair, and that any moment destiny will strike you down with its fate. Inconceivable was happening to her, and her sheer shock was too overwhelming. She could do nothing other than stand there shaking. Then the doll called to her once more, even raising one of her arms up slowly, causing her plastic limbs to grind together and let out a spine-chilling creak. My aunt let out a silent scream and collapsed. She recalled feeling like she was fainting, but her eyes were still open as she tumbled to the floor. She said the worst part about that incident was that she lay at the bottom of the step with the darkness encroaching her sight. The final thing she caught a glimpse of was Wendy running back to her room. The following morning, my grandfather found my aunt at the bottom of the steps, cold and terrified. She recounted her tale to my grandparents, but they never believed her. Who would? This was Newcastle in the 70s, an era and place not really known for its spirituality or open-mindedness, and my grandparents were old-fashioned. My gran believed in heaven and hell and nothing else, and my grandfather believed in nothing. There was no way they would accept that a doll had sprung to life. They told her she must have been dreaming, sleepwalking. Regardless, my aunt was so terrified by the event, she forced my grandparents to get rid of Wendy. I know from the outside looking in, it must have seemed odd, because the doll hadn't actually expressed any desire to hurt her or made any attempt to do so. But my aunt swears that something or someone else was there with the doll, speaking through her, and that the look that was on the doll's face was not a friendly or warming one. It was threatening and terrifying. My gran was devastated that my aunt had become so terrified of the doll. After all, it was an expensive gift. But my grandparents decided it would be best to get rid of her, like my aunt wanted. However, instead of just tossing the doll out, they stored her in the loft. This should have been the end of it, but of course it wasn't. For years, my aunt claimed to hear footsteps pacing along the wooden beams in the loft, and even told me she heard voices, nursery rhymes, crying, all coming from the loft. One of the final nights she could recall activity occurring, she was entering her bedroom, and as she did, she passed under the loft hatch. And just before she closed her door behind her, she heard the voice of a small child whisper, "Let me out." The voice called down from the loft. My aunt looked up, and the minute she did, the hatch fell shut, suggesting someone had briefly pulled it open to whisper down to her, a fear made impossible by the fact that the bolts that kept it shut were on the outside. Horrified by the event, my aunt swapped rooms with my dad to be further away from the loft entrance, and it seemed to help. Strangely, the activity just stopped of its own accord, and my aunt grew up, moved out, and chalked the experience up to a night terror and an overactive imagination. However, whenever I would joke about getting the doll down or going to see her, my Aunt Lynn's skepticism would vanish and be replaced by a terrified and worried look. "Don't ever say that. You stay away from that doll," she would always tell me.
That's probably just
I just
me.
thought she was a little mad. We all have a mad aunt, but any doubts I had were quickly quashed when I had my own encounter with Wendy. This is where I come in. I'm 23 years old. I was raised on a working-class estate in Newcastle. I never really thought much of my aunt's spooky or scary stories. I just always thought she was trying to scare me. But in hindsight, she seemed genuinely shaken when recounting her experiences. I should have listened to her. It might have stopped me from ever going into that loft. Anyway, my experience with my aunt's beloved doll occurred when I was 17. Coming from a working-class area where people are very community-driven and family-oriented, I didn't hesitate when my grandfather asked me to help him put flooring down in his loft. He had lived there for 40 or 50 years and needed some more space to store stuff. The loft itself had a small section that had flooring in it, and it was there that all the unwanted things lived. Empty containers, dusty photo albums, the Christmas tree, all the holiday decorations, and of course the discarded children's toys. But other than that small section of flooring, the majority of the loft was just wooden beams and that awful yellow fiberglass insulation. The air inside was heavy, dusty, and the ceiling, being quite low, made it feel like a rather claustrophobic place to be. The loft entrance itself was just a hatch in the ceiling. This entrance was directly above the door to my aunt's bedroom. As I've already stated, the loft hatch was locked from the outside, and the loft itself had no light, meaning my grandfather had to use a light attached to a cable. He plugged it in a socket in the corridor below and climbed up into the loft. As I entered, I got hit by a wave of anxiety and surprise when I saw the infamous doll that had terrified my aunt. It was positioned atop a box of tinsel and Christmas tree lights. I would be lying if I said those stories didn't come rushing back in that moment, but at the time I was 17 and thought I knew everything. I just pushed all those scary stories to the back of my mind and got stuck into helping put the boards down. Each time I placed a board down, I felt like Wendy's eyes were fixed on me. It felt like her cold, dead gaze never left me the entire time. By
Why
the
did
second
they
day,
even
we had
keep
pretty
the
much
doll?
decked the whole loft. I won't lie, I was relieved. I had no desire to spend any more time in a dark, tight space with that doll that had terrorized my aunt as a child. However, luck was not on my side that day. My grandfather asked me to check if the loft would still shut, without the new flooring blocking or hindering it. Unfortunately for me, this meant that the cable light would have to be taken out of the loft and the hatch closed up. My grandfather volunteered me to stay in the loft, just in case something did block the hatch from closing. I was about to ask to swap roles, but I didn't want him thinking of me as a big girl's blouse, a phrase my grandfather would often use to describe me. Foolishly, my pride got the better of me and I agreed to stay in the loft. But as the light faded, I couldn't help but look back at that child-sized doll sitting there atop her throne of dusty boxes and lost things. As the last rays of light slithered across Wendy's rubbery skin and cold eyes, instinct or something within me made me reach for the hammer my grandfather had been using. Then suddenly I could see nothing. The whole loft was swallowed up by darkness and I was blind. I had never felt so vulnerable. But when nothing immediately happened, I began to ridicule myself silently. But then I heard a faint rustle, like something rattling around in a box. My eyes still hadn't adjusted, but I knew where the sound was coming from. My heart already started to pound and I held my breath for a moment, hoping to hear nothing. But in the silence, I heard one single tap. Then another, and another, and I realized it was footsteps, small footsteps. Suddenly, the pitter-patter of small feet scrambled along the boards ahead of me, and I would love to say I wasn't frightened. I was terrified. All those stories my aunt had told me, they raced through my mind as the footsteps speeded towards me. I was so scared. I shut my eyes and awaited my fate. I'm not ashamed to admit I was so frightened I couldn't even swing the hammer I was clutching. I just let out a scream. I was sure I would be dead or never seen again. But nothing happened. I opened my eyes and found the whole loft was lit up again, and my granddad was just laughing and shaking his head. He called me a woman, then laughed it off. I tried to laugh it off as well, but I was still full of fear. Maybe my grandfather was right. Maybe it was just the dark and my overactive imagination. but all those explanations left my mind when I looked over at the boxes. I went dead silent. My whole body started trembling. My grandfather looked at me and kept asking me what was wrong, but I couldn't summon the words to explain. That's how afraid I was. I knew then that for the moment I truly understood the feeling my aunt had, that dark night when her doll came to life. For you see, Wendy was no longer at the top of the boxes and Christmas decorations as she had been when I first entered. Now she was there resting upon a beam in the far corner, like a child pretending to be asleep or playing dead. Upon her face was a frozen smile, a smile that I felt was aimed at me, a smile that said, "All those stories were true. I know you know, and no one else will ever believe you." After that, I didn't stick around. I made a swift exit from the loft, telling my granddad that I had just scared myself. In truth, I couldn't actually believe what had happened. I didn't want to believe it. Needless to say, I never wanted to be around that doll, and so I never went back up into that loft, and my visits to my granddad's house became less frequent. I've since moved down south and had pushed my experience to the back of my mind, and for 6 years of my life I was free of Wendy, until she decided to pay me one last visit. One night I was locked in this awful nightmare. I was lying in bed, and I could hear giggling and could feel something crawling up over my quilt. When I looked down, I saw Wendy crawling up towards my head, and before I could let out a scream, she pulled the covers over my head as if to suffocate me. I thrashed about so wildly I actually woke up my boyfriend beside me. Thankfully, it was just a dream. A terrible nightmare. Even though the nightmare was over, I was so frightened by my experience. I phoned up my auntie the next day and told her all about it. I even confessed to having had my own experience with the doll 6 years ago. She didn't seem surprised, and seemed shocked that I had dreamt about the doll 6 years later. She reassured me, though, that the doll was gone, and she managed to convince my grandfather, who was a bit of a hoarder, to clear out his loft. He had put most of his stuff in a skip. I don't know if it was a coincidence, but my blood ran cold the moment she told me that when...
Alright, so here's what I'm gonna do. If you really want to see the doll, I'm gonna give you a second to respond. Hello? Alright, so I'm gonna go on my camera, right? I hope the connection is good downstairs. Not sure. Camera. Alright, I'm gonna let you see, trust me. Now, can you see? Alright. I hope the connection is good, alright? So, I'm gonna go downstairs right now. Oh, Jesus, dark downstairs. Hope I get good connection in the basement. Okay? Going to the basement right now. Okay. Stream is still good. Basement. Are you seeing this? Yeah, I know. Alright, boom, basement. It's humid down here. Okay, so I actually lost connection. But you saw it, right? So I'm gonna try to do this fast. If you're watching still. Are you watching? Hello? Alright, you're watching, right? Alright, so I'm gonna do this really quick, alright? So, the stream will end. Alright, I'm gonna go to camera now. Uh, really quick, just in and out, alright?